Yes, big day. Recording in progress. Okay. Thanks for coming back. Yeah, we've got a bit to cover today, so we'll get straight into it. For FullCAM, we're going to cover one application of FullCAM for one method, which is environmental planting. FullCAM is used normally for HIR and FMR, i.e. the future IFLM method. But at the moment is also used for avoided clearing method, which are the two most tricky methods to use FullCAM for. So that's good. We're going to do environmental plantings. I'll get straight into the presentation, and then we go into FullCAM itself. Let me share screen.
You're right there, Christophe. Need a hand?
No, that's all right.
Right.
You tell me when you can see my screen.
We're good to go.
Cool. We're good to go. Excellent. So FullCAM basics. How does FullCAM work? FullCAM was originally, I've been told, I haven't checked it, although I should always check. FullCAM was built a long time ago, and that's why it looks and feels a little bit clunky. For plantation, for forestry, and to calculate the yield of a plantation, and project what the when to harvest, etc., and what the expected tonnage would be. Now on top of that, since about 2010, I think it's been built up for use in national greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Yeah, so it's pretty pivotal in Australia's emission calculation, because that's what it's used for, essentially for land use calculation. So it's a very, and there's a number of versions of it for public use. The 2016 version and the 2020 version are being used for the AccuScheme scheme methods, right? 2016 version is only used for the newest forestry plantation method, because the 2020 version, who's more powerful and more simple, doesn't actually have all the calibration required for and the species required for plantation calculations. So apart from that method, everybody uses the 2020 version. There's a 2023 version that was meant to be issued, as the name implies, in 2023, but isn't available apart from an online calculator, I think, which I've never used. So, and the methods don't require that. The method all mandate to use the 2020 version. So that's the one that we're going to use. You'll see when we get down to using it, the FullCAM has millions of capabilities and parameters, which we don't use. My advice is don't touch them. Because it's prescribed by the methods that you should not touch them. And the other reason is because you don't need to. So every method comes with what's called a template, where every single parameter in FullCAM has been preset by the template to represent the needs of the method. So you don't need to. You actually need to touch very few things in FullCAM to use it. So we'll be using the templates, which is the reason why, it's pretty simple to use, despite the fact that it's an actually incredibly complex program and very rich. Other important concept in FullCAM, super important, is the notion of model point. FullCAM does not actually calculate the carbon stock in your CEA. FullCAM calculates the carbon stock at a model point. And then you extrapolate that model point by multiplying what FullCAM calculates at that point over the area of your CEA. So FullCAM does give you, at that model point, you would have, X ton of carbon per hectare in your trees, right? And multiply that by your 100 hectare CEA. Now, the location of the model point matters enormously. The method specifies exactly where to locate the model point. And there are more guidelines how to locate the model point in the CFI mapping guidelines document, which I mentioned yesterday. Why do the model points matter? Because the full cam model actually varies surprisingly in space. Literally, this morning, we had an example of a project where by moving the model point about 1 kilometer, the yield went up or down by about 20%, right? So pretty critical that you locate the model point at the right place. Now, you don't have a choice because much of a choice because the model point specifies where you should put the model point, but you have a little bit of leeway. So when you actually do the calculation, well, I always try to shift the model point a little bit within the limits of what's allowed. So trying to find the best yield. And sometimes, yeah, you can find the best yield still within the locations allowed for your model point.
Christophe, can you extrapolate? Can you expand on that for a second? So in a CEA of 50 hectares, how many modal points might there be, and how do you get to determine which one you use? Like, would there be 1 or 2 or 10 or 20? And yeah, how many times can you run full cam to determine a modal point?
You'll see it's not full, literally when you in the groove. It takes you 10 minutes to run a full cam simulation, so you can test quite a number of model points. The thing is that, for example, for avoided clearing, the model point, and for EMP as well, the model point is meant to be located at the approximate center of the CEA. So we'll see actually, because the CEA, that model CEA that we're using today is, roughly about that size. You can't move it too much. So you can move it by, say, in a 50 hectare CEA, you may be able to move your model point by 100 meters, 200 meters. So you'll get a different result. Sometimes that's sufficient to get a different result, because full cam is tile based. So if your model point shift into a different tile with a better yield, then you'll get a better yield even within a small distance. But you need to be lucky enough to be just on the boundary. But it makes a significant difference. Just, as I always say, I'm very jealous because my neighbor, who's got an avoided clearing project as well, and is literally 500 meters from me, has got a yield which is maybe not double, but at least 50% better than mine. And he's not doing anything better than me. So anyway, so model points matter a bit. That answers your question, Morty? Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Dates also matter in full cam. You'll see when we go through the EMP example. For EMP, it's pretty simple, but for other methods, not as much. Especially HIR and an FMR, but we don't have to worry about those too much. The method specifies exactly how you should set the date of your simulation in full cam, right? What's the other things that are important? Oh yeah, calibrations. Full cam is a simulator, of course. And the good thing about a simulator is that, it's repeatable. So if you do your simulation before the project, you're pretty much sure that that's what you're going to get when you actually claim your accuracy. So there's a high level of certainty associated with that. It's not 100% certain, because the method require you to actually re-simulate your full cam, re-download the data in full cam changes in the meantime, you're going to get a different result from your pre-submission estimate. But it's highly unlikely. I don't think I've ever seen it. Right, so it's fairly certain. But being a model, it needs to be very carefully calibrated so that the estimate is as close as possible to what's happening on the ground. To do that, Fullcam has a database of soil types, rainfall, a number of other parameters, which downloads live, you'll see it, but also has a set of parameters of specific growth rate for every species of tree, DBH growth, root depth, you name it. And it uses those calibrations. Even within the template, you can have several calibrations to actually model your growth. For EMP, you can apply a number of different calibrations to Fullcam, which would lead you to different results within the same model point, within the same templates, within the same everything, right? This is to simulate, depending on the quality of your plantation, you might have better growth rate for your trees, and therefore more carbon stored. And the calibration are meant to be reflecting that. Now you can say, why don't I just pick the calibration that has the better yield? Yes, but to use those calibrations, for example, there's a calibration that is, I've got more than 1,500 stems per hectare planted. You need to be able to reflect that requirement on the ground. So you can use that calibration, but on the ground, you've got to plant, 1,500 stems per hectare, which is pretty high, right? So yes, you can use calibration that are more favorable, but you've got to make sure that you do that on the ground as well, right? And that's, of course, will be checked at audit. Last thing before we jump into it, Fullcam produces what's called a .plo or plot file, it gives a plot file where you record the model point, the type of calibration you've used, the dates of the simulation, etc. And then you click on simulate, and it generates the result of the simulation, which you'll see, which you can download into an Excel file. Right? This Excel file contains essentially 4 columns by date, where you have the tons of carbon stored in the trees, the ton of carbon stored in debris, the methane emitted by fire, if you have simulated a fire event, nitrous oxide emitted by fire, if you have a fire event. You take those Excel files and you use them directly for the abatement calculation. All the methods have calculations which are geared toward using exactly that template, which is produced by Fullcam. So pretty easy. Take it from Fullcam, plonk into your abatement calculation, and off you go. 2 things I just mentioned is that the abatement calculations work on sometimes 2 plot files, where the abatement calculation compares a baseline plot file to a project plot file. Typical example is avoided clearing, where the method is based on the fact that you're avoiding clearing. So what you're doing is not clearing compared to a scenario where you're repetitively clearing. So your baseline scenario, that is a plot file where you've had that repetitive cycle of clearing, and your project scenario is over the same period, you're not clearing and you let the trees grow. And the abatement calculation is the difference in carbon storage between those 2 scenarios. So I think it's the only method that uses 2 plot files is avoided clearing. Right? I also just mentioned now events. For when you're simulating your abatement prior to the submission, usually don't include any event. But when you're submitting your offset report, you must include in your Fullcam calculation all the actual events that have been happening. Events in Fullcam are fire. I don't think there's a drought event. Forest treatment, clearing, thinning, everything you do to the forest. So when you submit your offset report, you must say, oh, well, there was a little bit of a fire on one corner of the CEA and it destroyed 10% of the trees. Hopefully not 1% of the trees. I've thinned the forest because it's good for it. So you introduce a thinning event, etc., etc. For plantings, for example, when you weed or when you fertilize, you need to include those as events in full cam. They're called events, right? You might as well, you might also include them in your pre pre-submission abandonment estimate if you want. For example, if you know that in your project you're going to burn for fuel reduction every 3 years, might as well simulate that from the start, right? So that you got an estimate which is closer to what you're actually going to be able to claim. Voila for the basics before we jump into it. Any question? Dun, dun, dun. I don't believe I'm that clear.
Anybody? Ferris, Bueller? Nope.
Yep, I've got a question.
Yes, Wendy.
Yes.
Yeah. When you're talking about events, if you've got a plantation, what about a crash grazing for fuel load management? Does that come in as an event?
No, because it's not meant to be touching the trees, and you are only allowed to graze under the method if it is not detrimental to the I can't remember the exact wording. Not detrimental to the growth of the trees, basically.
Yep.
So
Yep.
if your grazing actually, if your grazing goes well, you don't have to simulate it. If your grazing goes badly and some of your trees are damaged, if it's a serious damage, it's considered disturbance, and that you have to A, report it, and B, model it. And you'd model it probably using the fire event. You'd model it using the thinning event.
Right.
There's no specific event damaged by grazing, so you'd have to find an event that actually is able to simulate that. But normally, if your grazing is managed in a way it should be, which is not damaging your plantation, then you don't need to simulate it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No worries. Righto. I'm going to go into full cam now. People who have downloaded full cam and have it on their computer might as well jump into that and follow because I'm going to share my screen full cam and do a real live scenario. So we might as well try to do it in parallel, so that if you stumble on every question, on any question or something that you don't understand, why do we go from A to B? What's that tab here doing, etc.? Why doesn't it work for me? Then you can ask those questions, right? Now also showing that is the CA that we're going to use, which is the same as for the case study that I sent yesterday, that little pink CA. Because the case study is about an EMP, I thought we might just use the same one for tonight. Now, if you look at the bottom of the screen, anyone who anyone who wants to do the full calculation in real time, you will have, and I know it's very small, you'll have to note down those coordinates, because those are the coordinates where the 0 is in the center of the screen, which is going to be our model point.
Christophe,
yeah.
I've got a dumb question, and I'm sorry, but that CEA for environmental mallee plantings looks like it's got greater than 20% coverage. So why are we mapping a area that would be ineligible?
Thank you, Wally. That was one of the trap in my case studies. Excellent.
Sorry. I just fucked up the whole thing.
No, not at all, because I was expecting that question. So thank you. If we had planned it, we couldn't have planned it better. That was, and I planned it this way because that was an illustration to say, to illustrate the fact that GIS systems are not always accurate. So that image is actually the one that is the most recently available spatial image layer in Queensland. But you'll see that CEA actually, if you look at it out there, it's part of my place. It's actually cleared. Now there's a trap in the case study, but I'll tell you, I can't resist. Now everybody who's read the method should ask me, hang on a minute, if it has been cleared in the last 5 years, it still is not eligible for planting. Because the land must have been cleared of forest cover in the last 5 years to be able for plantings, right? So everybody should ask me, when was it cleared? And you'll be all relieved to know it's been cleared in 2018. So it is eligible for planting. So thank you, Wally, because that CEA, even though it looks like it's got forest, is actually eligible for plantings because it's actually clear now. So, yes, because it was cleared just over 5 years ago. Thank you. So the model point which we're gonna use there, but the learning of that is be careful when you receive information about something from a place that you don't know. You might see things on GIS that are very different from what they really are. Now, this is the free version. Paid version have access to more recent data. And in most cases, Google Earth, I haven't checked whether that it shows cleared in Google Earth, but in most instances, Google Earth is more up to date than many of the public layers. Not necessarily as detailed a resolution than that, but very often up to date. So when you have a doubt, go and check in Google Earth to see exactly what the status is accurate, right? Righto. So we were into the model point. If you can make a note of those coordinates down here, because we'll use them in the full GAM file, and you'll need them for the case study anyway. So it's 25.52544 and Y152 4431. We're good. I can go into full cam. I've got them noted down anyway, so if anybody missed them, I can tell them. Oh, whilst I'm there, I'm talking about mapping. Should be careful not to take too much time, but you see the little EPSG 4939 here at the bottom of the screen? That is the coordinate system that is required by the CER to be published in. So that tells me that I'm in the right coordinate system to publish a GIS file for the CER. So just a reminder that mapping is also a little bit tricky. Righto, let's go and unless anyone has an objection, we'll go straight into full cam. What's my full cam? Here we go. You tell me when you can see it.
We're looking at the output file.
You're looking at probably a very strange
Error.
Something like, yeah, exactly. It looks like an error. So any one of you who had actually just started full cam should be seeing the same error screen. And I'm telling you straight away, this is one of the most confusing things with full cam at the moment is that they've changed the location of the server. So what full cam is saying is that it's not finding the right server. So you have to go and modify the server that you're using to get rid of that error. So I'm going to move you, sorry. Move you again. You got to accept the license. Yeah, yada, yada, yada. What are you seeing? Because I can't see anything anymore.
We're just seeing the toolbar at this stage, not a window within it.
Oh, it's just a toolbar. Actually, I can't see the toolbar myself. Let me see. Maybe I need to reshare it. Oh, okay. All right.
We can see you hovering over the toolbar headers.
Okay, cool. All right, the toolbar had disappeared. Had disappeared for me. All right. So to start a full cam simulation, you go to like everybody file, and you create your plot file. All right. But you don't create your plot file with a new plot file. You create your plot file from template to use the appropriate template. Oh, sorry. I said I would change the server and I didn't. So excuse me for that. To change the location of the server, you go into Internet, server setting, and you click on use an alternate server, which is this one. So you can make a note of it. It's http /fullcam.au/fullcamserver 2020. So it's exactly the same as the primary server. Instead of .com, it's .au. If you don't use fullcam, you need, and mine is coming up because I've used it before, but the first time you actually need to type this. The same as the primary, but replace the .com with a .au.
We've got a question here, Christophe, and
Yes.
and the sympathy. Are we able to use look-see instead of full cam? Look-see seems simpler. Yeah.
I wish. The answer is no, unfortunately, because as I said, the abatement calculation in every method are geared to you taking, actually it's required that you use full cam. It's as simple as that. Plus you couldn't do the look-see would not give you the output that you need for an abatement calculation. You'll see the output when we get to it. So unfortunately, no. It'd be nice, yes, I know. Okay, so now that we've got the server, we will be able to use a template. Yes. So that is where you use, you select your template, which of course is going to be environmental planting. Now, before you click OK, which is something I do every single time, or you don't double click on that, you go straight there before double clicking, and you enter your latitude and longitude of your model point, right? So it's yes. Now, oh, I got that wrong. It's actually 52544. Now, straight away, you'll see that something happened is that on this window, it looks like fullcam has truncated your model point. In fact, no, it only displays less decimals, but it's actually stored the entire decimals. So don't try to re-enter it. It's going to do exactly the same time. So start date and end date for the EMP is specified in the method and is the date that you actually plant. And the end date is 100 years later. So say we're going to plant in 1st of January next year. This is the start date of the simulation, and then the end date of the simulation is 25. Cool. Are we good?
And do you want to explain why it's 100 years if a project's only 25 years, just to remind people?
Because in some methods, for two reasons. A, for avoided clearing, for example, I mentioned the baseline scenario where you have that repeated cycle of clearing. The cycle of clearing may be, say, 20 years, and the method requires to calculate the average over a long period of time. So you need to simulate over 100 years so that you have more of those cycles and a better view of the average. That's answer number one. Answer number two, in some methods, you don't start the crediting. You don't start your simulation at the exact start date of the start of the project. For example, HIR, you actually start the modeling back in time where the regeneration actually started, which might be a few years before. So you need to cover your crediting period. So to make it simple, I guess they've said 100 years for everybody. Your simulation length is always 100 years. I've never seen this. No, I don't know any method that has a simulation year other than 100 years. So I guess they've made it simple, 100 years, just to cover all those cases. All right. Cool. Now we have there, that's the main, oh, sorry, you can also, of course, once you've entered the basics of your plot file, you can save it as you see fit there, right? That is the main window of FullCAM that you see here. All those tabs are where you can find all the details of your simulation. The only one that are of interest to us are the data builder and the events, right? All the other ones are all the endless sophistication and complexity and intricacies of FullCAM. You will never use them, right? You can check them, for example, timing. You've got your timing here, and you can change the timing here. You don't have to go back to that very first screen. So if you want to modify your plot file to do another simulation with a different set of dates, you can do it here. But normally you wouldn't use it, right? So the data builder is the first place you'd go to. That is where, for an environmental planting, you actually select the tree species that you're going to model. Now, you can see down in the available trees, that's some of the available trees, not all, of the available trees that you can simulate in FullCAM. Now, you're not going to pick every single species of trees in your forest. Fortunately, you can see here the forest category. FullCAM provides you with pre-prepared forest mixes, so to speak. It's a bit like a cocktail recipe. So for EMP, you have two choices. If you remember when I talked about calibration, in EMP, you have two types of calibration, what they call the generic calibrations, which are simpler, less demanding on the ground, especially from an audit perspective, but of course have a slightly more conservative yield in FullCAM, right? But what you lose maybe in the modeling, you gain into the fact that you don't have to go out and sample your forest, right? So that for generic calibration, which is what we're going to start with, this is the forest type that you pick. For specific calibration, as it says here, you pick the specific calibration, right? So if you pick an RF method, therefore the generic calibration, then you click on download spatial data. This is where FullCAM goes into its database and retrieves, depending on your location, it retrieves what tree species are actually available, because of course the tree species available in Northern Australia would be very different from the ones in Tasmania. So it retrieves the tree species available in your case, as well as the soil, rainfall, etc. data. And this is the tree species that would be available for your modeling of a planting in FullCAM. should you wish to do them individually. Now, in the 2016 version, you have, which is a lot more granular and but a lot less simple to use, you'd have a lot more trees available for modeling. In the case of the 2020 version, the method requires you to use that tree, which is actually a sort of an average tree. Right. So this is the one that you're going to use. Okay, what did it come up?
What's its label for those that are viewing on your screen? It's a bit small to read. What's that label of the tree type you're using?
It's called mixed species environmental planting.
Thank you.
There we go. Now this is the tree species that you're going to use, and now if it's in that upper box. So yeah, tell me if it's too small to read because it's pretty small. It's pretty small on my screen, so it will be terrible on yours. Now that the tree species up on that box, it'll be available to be modeled for events, right? So that's all we have to do in the data builder. Now we go to events. Events, you see, there's two different parts of the event window. The one on the left, which is called regime editing, allows you to some method, instead of creating a planting event, then a clearing event, then a burning event, then they have pre-prepared regimes of treatment of the forest that you can model straight away. For example, see, oh, there's another one then. Yeah, there's a regime available for planting. The one I wanted to show you, which is more meaningful, is in the avoided clearing template, so you can't see it here. So, but it doesn't matter because we're not using regimes in EMP, we're just using events. And the only event that you have to include in the modeling is guess what, a planting event. So, so if you click here, those are all the types of events that you have available: planting, thinning, fire, treatment, chopper roller, and even termite change. I don't think you're allowed to use chopper roller and termite change in EMP, but they're there, of course, as a legacy of the plantation origin of full cab. So if we do tree planting, now you select tree planting, the date of your planting, which is 1 January 2025, and then you select in the species. Oops, sorry, got my date wrong. Yep, you select the species you want to plant. Now see the species here reflect the species that was in your green box in the data builder. So you can only plant mixed species environmental planting. If you click insert standard values, that's where you input the type of planting of your mixed environmental planting that you've done. In the method, when you read the method, you'll see that a planting is defined by the mix of species. In this case, because it's a generic calibration, we're using the mixed environmental planting, which is meant to be a mix of species representative of your local environment, which has been selected in full count based on my location. But then there are two other important parameters. One is the geometry, and the other one is the density, right? So that is reflected here, where you see I've got the choice of the second one, mixed species environmental plantings are within riparian or floodplain zone, is actually not available for the method, so you can't use it, sorry. But the top one, which is mixed species environmental planting on land managed for environmental services, is what is called in the method a block planting. That is anything which is not a belt planting. And there, the last two are the belt plantings, depending on the density of your belt planting. In the method, you have a table that converts your various requirements into the full cam calibration that you need to use, right? So say I want to use a belt planting of high density. Voila, that's my event. Okay, very cool. So, okay. And now I've got an event on the 1st of January 2025, which is planting my mixed species in a belt configuration at more than 1,500 species, 1,500 stem per hectare. And that's all you have to do. That's it, done. Full cam, tick. From there, sorry, I'm going to move that down. You have the button simulate here in the main toolbar at the top, where you have two things. When you click on it, you have run the plot simulation, which, no surprise, runs, apologies, the plot simulation, and that thing output to Excel, which you can tick or untick, produces the Excel files that I mentioned. So you can run a simulation just to have a look without necessarily producing the Excel file. And when you're ready, actually produce the Excel file. So let's have a look without producing the Excel file for a moment, what it looks like. Wink. Whoops. Voila. Right. So this is this is very poor. Oh my God. This is not a very high yield. I'm not happy with myself. So this is the yield over 100 years. So the green. So those are those four things here: sea mass of trees, sea mass of debris, methane emitted due to fire, and nitrous oxide are the four parameters that fit straight into the abatement calculation of the method. That big green line is, of course, the mass of carbon stored in the trees, and that's the pink line one is the amount of carbon stored in the debris. There's, of course, no, well, the lines are there at the bottom, but of course zero because we haven't modeled any fire, but there would be, otherwise there would be. You'll see the methane and nitrous oxide curve go up and down, right? So this is what the simulation looks like. Not very exciting, but that is not a great yield at all. So there you go. Now we're going to export it to Excel. So let's start again with, yeah, but you can't see it. Yeah. If I do simulate again, it looks exactly, oh, can you see that little window that just appeared? No.
We can see the output file.
Yeah, but can you see the Excel? No, because it's open an Excel window, but you can't see it.
No, you need to stop reshare.
No. Yeah, stop and reshare. But basically, it's opened an Excel window, like an Excel window, pre-populated with all those things in data format. Now, you can also see it in here. You got all those little things. You can see it in a table format. So there's all the dates. And then you've got tabulated with the mass of carbon in the trees and the debris, the methane and the nitrous oxide. Now, that table is exactly tip-top what's produced as an Excel format. So of course you could also copy that and copy it back into an Excel, but you know the output to Excel saves you doing that.
So that's going to be 12 months for 100 years. That's going to be what, a 1,200 row Excel file that has the carbon output from debris, from leaves, from and then the NO2 and the CH4 for the same period over 100 years. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. There has been a question. Apparently the pilot method allows as opposed to the environmental planting on its own, but the pilot method allows full cam and look-see tools to be used. I've just had a link from Colette and Vince showing, and Tom Reed actually from Southern Tablelands put that in as well. So just to check on that, thank you, Colette, for pasting in the calculating. We might just put that into the car park for now and come back to it, Christophe, when you've had time to read, check in on that, and maybe you can talk to the benefits or the of using full cam over look-see or vice versa. Yeah.
The answer is I don't know, and nobody knows, because the purpose of the pilot planting is to actually simplify all that for landholders, right? And that's why the mapping, for example, is you don't have to use that specific coordinate reference system. You can use any Google Earth for the pilot method, and you can also use look-see for offset reporting. Now, the pilot method was published in 2022, and nobody has ever reported an offset report for it. So literally, I was told by the CER, I think 2 weeks ago, that they were just about to publish the way to offset report for the pilot method, not using full cam. But if what you've just reported are the actual templates, I'll be happy to see them. I don't know how, but I don't know how they work. But yeah, they were meant to be producing that in this month. So I don't know if they've done that already. And the pilot method is absolutely great because it doesn't require you, or it's one of the main benefits, it doesn't require you to have audits as well. The audits are done by the CER using satellite data to monitor the growth of your plantings and any event and any disturbance event. So pilot planting, hallelujah, awesome. I hope, nobody knows, but I hope that they will maintain it in the rejuvenation of the planting method. I can't see why they wouldn't, because it's such a great addition to the method. I don't see the pilot planting method disappearing, but officially it also sunsets with the normal EMP in 30th of September this year. Yeah, in September this year. So yeah, happy to see. But it's look-see is actually based on full cam. It's the same thing. So, but I don't think look-see does not produce any output. So I don't know how you can base an offset report based on that, because that hasn't been done yet. So has anyone seen those offset reporting template for the pilot method?
I don't believe so, but I think what's confusing people is that look-see and full cam can give a different output, and look-see might appear to be easier to use than full cam. And if they're giving different outputs, maybe it's more favorable to use one compared to the other. And so I guess that decision tree isn't well articulated for people in the pilot program. In the pilot method, right?
In the pilot method. I don't think that look-see would give more favorable results than a specific. Well, anyway, the pilot method is only one calibration. You don't have the choice of calibration when you use the pilot method. I don't know whether I've never done the comparison between Luxi and full cam at the same point. Luxi, in my opinion, is a little bit erratic in the results it gives. So not sure. And honestly, if you're going to do ever more than one project using full cam, it's really that simple to use once you know how to use it. It's a little bit strange and mysterious in the beginning, but once you know how to use it, you literally have to use two tabs that are Builder and the Events tab. Something I forgot to mention, which I've forwarded to you yesterday, is a full cam guides for every method except the pilot, because yeah, nobody has done the simulation in the pilot method. Every method that uses full cam has an associated full cam guide, which will literally give you step by step with little pictures, you know, with arrows pointing, click here, what you have to do. So if you follow the guide absolutely step by step, it's not very difficult to use full cam, honestly. Did anyone have a question?
Colette and Vince, is that clear as mud as to Luxi and full cam? You there, Colette? No. All right.
No.
Carry on, Christophe. Sorry for derailing.
All right.
Yep.
Pilot just tells us to use
doesn't tell us, but we
Hello?
Colette
Yes.
or Vince, was there a follow-on question, or are you happy with that response?
guidelines from Jeff Kay and what's on screen for the environmental plan.
so you're suggesting that they're accepting two methods, and one method may give a better result for the proponent than another method, but we don't know which one that is, so we have to do both to find that out. Is that the take-home message out of all of this?
I had trouble hearing you. What did you say? Did you get?
Christophe, I think the question is, if they've got two methods, Luxi, full cam, are they better off testing both of them to see which one gives the best results? Or, you know, is that the advice? Yeah.
I don't know, because again, for the pilot method, I've never seen how to build an offset report on Luxi. It's never been done. My suspicion will be that given how rigorous the CR is, you might be able to use Luxi and submit your offset report using Luxi, but it will be either they will make sure that the Luxi is aligned with the block ES calibration of full cam, so that Luxi actually replicates the use of full cam, but makes it easier for you, in which case the use of Luxi and full cam should be tip-top the same. But they're going to make sure that Luxi actually does the same job as full cam. That's my suspicion that they will do. Or another possibility is what they do for the geographic mapping. You can submit your geographic mapping in a different format, and they actually redo the mapping for you. So maybe the offset reporting for the pilot method will be you submit a Luxi result, they take that and they reapply their own calculation and check that it's similar using full cam. I don't know, just purely speculation. But I doubt very much, knowing how the CR is rigorous in their accrediting and deadly rigorous in their accrediting, that there would be any choice or ability to game the system. I'd be super surprised. Right? So that's close to impossible, and good for the integrity of the system. Okay. Now, We are probably out of time to do another simulation. What I wanted to do is to do the same simulation, but using a different calibration to show you what the outcome will be and the consequences of that. But I've done it before, so I'll switch back to the presentation and I'll show you the results if you do that.
We have a question there from Jeremy, which is,
yeah, go Jeremy.
Where did we put in the size of the planting, or was that understood by the plot file? And
very good question. Thank you for that. It's a very basic question. Should have mentioned it. Maybe if I go back to just share screen. Where's my? Actually, I'll show you that is the. Can you see my share screen loading? It's loading. Poof, here you go. Actually, that is the Excel output that we just produced, right? So if you see those columns here, for example, the CMAS of 3, if I can click on the right place, you'll see here that it's calculated in tons of carbon per hectare. So FullCam does not calculate it on your on the size of your planting. It's later when you do the abatement calculation that you actually multiply that number by the size of your planting. Right. So I'll come back to my presentation. You tell me when you can see it.
Come up now. Thanks, Christophe.
No worries. There you go. Righto. So that is a simulation that I did. I can't remember which model point I used, to be honest. But I used the same model point to do 3 different simulations using FullCam. One using a generic block planting geometry, and that's what you get. So if you can see associated to your question, Jeremy, this is in the results here are in everything per hectare. So you multiply that by your size of the planting. So that's the using a block geometry. You see that you plateau around 90 tons of carbon per hectare. That is the same model point using a generic belt planting. And you see that you actually have a much better yield using a belt planting than a block planting, which explains to you why the pilot method as a block forces you to use a block geometry, a block calibration, because it's a lot more conservative. You can actually underground, you can actually do whatever you want, but you have to model your offset report using a block geometry. So, and this is the generic, and I also modeled a specific calibration, which you see has pretty much the same as a generic planting. Now, the importance of that is that before you decide on your actual planting strategy with your agronomist, you need to understand which geometry you use and which one is going to be actually the most beneficial for you from the modeling perspective. Because if you can meet the requirements of the method in terms of geometry, stem density, etc., for a given type of planting, to be able to use the calibration associated with that type of planting that gives you those type of yield, that's what your offset report is going to be based on. So choose the planting that gives you the best results and make sure that you can actually meet the requirements of on the ground of that type of planting. So it's not cheating, it's making sure that you select what full cam, you select the planting that full cam believes is the most beneficial, has the best yield. So explore a little bit the plantings and explore a little bit the model points as well. So I said it can have a use. Yeah.
Can you explain in lay terms the difference between a block and belt planting?
Oh. Simple. I'll always remember the answer I got when I asked that to the CR. The answer is simple. A block is anything that is not a belt. I kid you not. So block and belt, and that's the actual definition. A block is anything that is not a belt. And a belt is defined by, there's a table in the method that defines exactly, you have, it's basically a number of rows of planting, a space, and another number of rows of plantings, right? And I'm not no ecologist, so if there's an ecologist on the call to explain why there's a higher yield from a belt planting as opposed to block planting, my hypothesis is that there's less competition from trees joining each other, and there's probably better light coming from the side of the belts as opposed to a uniform growth in the canopy. I don't know. That's my hypothesis. But in the method, the definition is a number of rows, a space which has to be very specifically met, and then another rows. And block is anything else.
Thank you, Christophe.
No worries. That is actually it. I don't know what time it is, but I think we've finished a little bit early.
It's 10 to 9. One of the things that I don't think you've covered is turning a full cam output for CMAS into a CO2e forward abatement yield.
Good point. All the methods that use full cam have specific ways of doing that, but basically you take the mass of trees and the mass of debris, add them together. That gives you the ton of carbon stored in your CEA. Multiply that by the magic 3.67 number. That gives you the CO2e that has been sequestered. And then there are manipulations that you do because you need to, there's a very specific way to calculate. If for example, your planting has started a little bit before your project declaration date, you need to take away the part that has started to grow before your declaration date, because that doesn't count towards the crediting. Now you're going to immediately ask, how is it possible to have a start planting date before the declaration date? Wouldn't that breach newness? Yes, of course it would. But this is in the case of transferring project between methods. So you may have started a project under a method and then transfer it, started planting, transfer it to the new method, and your planting date is still eligible because it's a transferee project for a previous method, but you're still not credited under the new method by the growth of the trees. Now, that's one of the fiddly little cases that all methods have to cater for, that makes it very complicated. But basically, what you do once you've got your output Excel, you put that into another Excel that manipulates all that, multiplied by 3, basically multiplied by 367. Also, what you have to then subtract is either the emission due to fire, which are also calculated by full cam, and also the emissions due to fuel used for your project. So if you use a truck to water your plantation, you have to record the fuel used by that truck And then in the abatement calculation, you have to subtract the emission used by that, created by that fuel to come to your net abatement. And then you have to subtract your permanence discount of 25% if using a 25-year permanence period. So usually what you have, you take those Excels, as you know, Wadi, you take those Excels and you plug them into another Excel, which is specific by method, and then spits out automatically your abatement calculation. So if you're doing an RFM project, you will have all those calculations, those calculators, because we have them. So you don't have to build them yourselves.
Excellent. We've got a couple of specific questions. Maybe stop sharing screen and people can talk to theirs. Colette and Vince have been exposed to the Jeff K method, and for some people on this call, they won't know what we're talking about. But the Jeff K method was a block planting qualified method, but it has the inter-row spaces that is enabling regrowth, and it has the species diversity, which enables it to be technically qualified as box gum grassy woodlands. If you're in the southern tablelands, you can get access to Jeff, and you can use your $10,000 CER readiness grants to get him to design that block planting style. And so, yeah, please feel free to consult with Jeff. But as a general principle, it's about having dense rows, a gap of sort of 10 meters, two more dense rows, maybe only a meter apart, and then a gap of another 10 meters. And so across a 20-meter width, you've actually got 6 rows of trees, and that's not a belt, which is a very technical definition. It's considered a block, even though it has plenty of space in between it. And yes, you can graze that inter-row space, is the point. After about 5 years, when the trees have got to a meter or 2 meters tall and are no longer, supper for the cattle or sheep. So yes, it's designed to be something that, in Jeff K's example, he grew out this carbon qualifying, biodiversity qualifying forest, which had ample grazing room. He's now rolling out the second zone to do what he's done in the first zone, which will enable him over time and to model this for other farmers in the region to creep across the landscape, adding every 5 years newly regenerated grazing areas, but that are also biodiverse and carbon qualifying areas. So
and as you know, Jeff has got he's compliant because he's got a project submitted, and the CER check that his geometry, even though it's a block that looks like a belt, is compliant. And James, I think, is the second project that uses his geometry.
That's correct.
It's like the Jeff K geometry, which is a block in the view of the CER, but in fact is a sophisticated block. There was another question in the chat that I saw pop up about the output graph. Was there?
I think Paris, do you want to ask your question directly?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was just comparing the belt and sorry, I've got a cold. The belt and the block graphs, and I can see like the scale on the sides. You can like see that there's more tons per carbon. But I was just wondering, like, is there a time period that you'll usually pick on the graphs to try and interpret, or are you adding the two together? Or like, yeah, when you're reading the graph, just basically what are you looking for you?
Yeah. If you take imagine the time where you're submitting your offset report. So if it's 10 years after the start date, you draw a line. Your line is cutting the two curves, one for the trees there, the mass of C in the trees, and the other one for the mass of carbon in the debris. You add those two, and there will be your at the date of your offset report, those two curves give you the exact mass of carbon that you are able to claim after multiplying by 367. Now, for your second offset report, if you draw a line at the second, if you draw a line at the second date, of course, you're not going to be able to claim the values that you got there, but the difference with the previous one, of course. But yeah, that's one. But it's a lot simpler to use the table version. You pick the date of your offset report, and then you get straight your values there, which is exactly what the abatement calculation Excel that we use does. Right? It just picks the date of your offset report in that big giant Excel, and that's where you read the thing. It's a lot easier than using the graph.
And
That's
Stephen,
perfect. Yep.
Stephen,
Nice.
the question around can you do soil carbon in between those planted spaces? The answer, I think, you're ineligible at the moment, but the integrated farm method is proposed to allow for that.
Yeah, exactly right. And there were endless debate in the technical workshops as to, whether if you credit for soil carbon, whether you're actually double crediting because of the mass of the root of the trees, which is not supposed to be calculated in that output of full cam. But there was endless debate as to whether that was entirely true or not, and dissecting of full cam to make sure that it didn't count actually under carbon underground. Yeah, so that's right. Not eligible yet, not possible yet.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we've hit our mark for today. Tomorrow is soil carbon, and we'll be talking about stratification. If you're not contemplating doing a soil carbon project as a self-proponent or as an advisor, you do not have to attend. We would still encourage you to attend Thursday on the economics of carbon projects and Friday on the FAQs and the handling common questions and questions that are specific. If you are interested, like some of us, on the generic and would like to understand environmental plannings and soil carbon, tomorrow will be an exciting day looking at stratification, soil samples, chains of custody, and all of those related topics. Christophe, any final words for tonight?
Yes, I forgot. Lisa asked a question yesterday about whether she was qualified to select how the species to do a carbon planting on that CEA. And I said, well, yes, you can. The answer is because you don't actually have to be an agronomist to select the plantation calibration, right? Even you have to be an agronomist to make sure that is translated into reality in the ground. But as a modeler, to just submit an application, you just have to, pick the best possible calibration and then discuss with the agronomist. So you can do a lot of things without being an agronomist. So that was it. Thank you. And thank you so much again for attending tonight. We shall see you tomorrow.
One last question. Joe's got his hand up. Let Joe sneak in and
sure.
I'll press stop record.
Sure. No problem.
Joe, you're on mute, mate.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for letting me ask. It might be outside the scope of tonight, but in comparison to soil carbon projects, obviously there's a lot of remeasuring, obviously even using a modeling-based system as well. But with a tree planting, environmental planting project, how much is involved with the auditing and remodel, like actually verification of what's there? Because we talked a lot about the modeling for calculating abatement.
Yeah, yep. Such a great question. Sorry, I didn't mention it because we were talking specifically about the full cam modeling. It depends on the calibration. Some calibration you actually have to verify by sampling on the ground, especially the calibration that have very high density, that the one that I used as an example, like more than 1,500 stems per hectare. Those ones, the method requires you to actually sample to verify that your calibration has actually been executed on the ground. but the simpler calibration, like the, you know, your stock standard generic block calibration, does not have to be sampled on the ground. So the answer to your question is, it depends what calibration you're using. If you're using a very aggressive and high yield calibration, then you have to verify it on the ground, but not for a simpler calibration.
Yeah, okay, that's quite interesting. So essentially, they'll take the modeled results as proof. If you have something less aggressive, it certainly makes it more cost effective than a soil project at that point.
Yeah, oh, definitely, absolutely. Or if you have a choice in terms, we'll see that in the economics. If you have a choice between soil and planting, it wins. You know, hands down, not a problem, not a problem. But the sampling for EMP is quite intense. If you read the method, you have to prove with a certain probability of exceedance that your stem density is actually superior to what the calibration requires. So you have to take to select the number of statistically significant sites that will be able to prove that, etc. It's pretty intense in terms of sampling for EMP if you choose an aggressive calibration.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer. Appreciate it.
No worry, I should have said that actually. Thank you for the question.
All right, thank you everyone. 40% of the way through. See you tomorrow for the hump day. Cheers, guys.
There you go.